God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord our God, your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The word of God for the people of God.
We hide God's word in our hearts, that we might not sin against God.
Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them the Beatitudes. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Let's follow Jesus with all we have and all that we are.
One of the reasons that trust and obey is always stuck in my memory is a story I've probably told before, but one of the pastors in my church had about a 5-year-old son who was a bit too hyper. And they sat right in the second row. The pastor's family always sat in the second row, right in front of the pulpit, any pastor at my church, my home church. And you could see his mom was getting exasperated with him. This was not a loud, outgoing church like this one. This was a church where, you didn't talk in the sanctuary at all. It was only a whisper. You shook hands out in the lobby. You didn't. It was very solemn, still, quiet. And he wasn't being solemn, still, or quiet. Finally, his wife looked like she was about to start crying. She was so frustrated. And he stopped the service and said, "The congregation will rise and sing trust and obey. And then, Johnny, come with me." The little boy shouted as he had been called out, "Pray for me!" When he came back in, his face was red, but he was quiet. But that always, the things that you think of that tie back. Now, this is not just a prop. This is the group of kids, and John and Sarah from camp. And this is junior and senior high age teenagers. There is not a whole lot that adults can do that they're not capable of as far as skill set. There are armies around the world that send the older among them anyway out into battle. If they're trained right, they can fix things, do things right, learn. It's mainly the maturity end that teenagers you still have to work with. The fact that they're capable of doing something doesn't mean they should. Younger than that, that's a picture of mine a few years back. Elementary age kids. Kids in elementary school can still do quite a bit as far as tasks and skills. But not everything that the high schooler can. They're not as large or as coordinated. And they have more to learn. Then I had to work a picture of Abby in there somewhere. Preschool age. Abby can't balance well enough to ride a bike yet. Her siblings have no trouble with that. She's learning some of the other things. But there's different levels of growth. Spiritual growth is the same way, except it doesn't always come with age. The thing is, most of the time, again, not everybody, sometimes there's different diseases or things that hold people back. But kids, as long as you feed them, give them water, and they're safe, generally they just get bigger on their own. And if they're out and active, they grow and do things. Nature is the same way. If there's water, you plant the food, it comes up, it grows. Spiritual growth should work like that. But sometimes we choose to stay immature and prefer the baby food or the mashed potatoes to the steak. We prefer being fed and taken care of to serving. Not all, not even most, but your age, the number of years as a Christian doesn't always go with how deep you are as a Christian. In your bulletin, you see up there, Tom Gross actually made this. Tom teaches a junior high Bible study before school on Friday mornings at Crestview. And they have a big group of kids that come. And a lot of times, some of us are very visual, like me. That was meant for a spiritual self-check. This is a sample of one that's filled out. In this one, the person's really good at following the 10 Commandments. So that was all the way filled out. They pray regularly. They're not as good at reading the Bible. They're good at worshiping. They never tell anyone about Jesus, so that one's blank. They make time for God. They do pray and read the Bible, or some, and make it to church. They don't do a lot of serving others either. Being away, they feel like when people talk to them, they see their faith. That's an example, just a sample. The idea is for this. You certainly don't have to, but if you're visually oriented, sometimes just by looking at that, you can see where you are and where you need to go. Not today, but last week and the week before in the adult class, we were talking about the parable of the sower. Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got to a boat and set out on the lake. While all the people were going along the shore and the water's edge, he taught them many things by parables, and his teaching said, "Listen, a farmer went out to sow seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprung up quickly, but because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered, because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times." The parable of the soil was not, Jesus was not teaching about farming. That was not his point at all. He, as many of the parables, was using a normal, everyday point. And this is one that, for most of us, will stomp on our toes from time to time as we read it. A lot of times we put a lot of effort. The soil that's on the path and eaten by the birds is when people don't understand God's word. Obviously, you can't apply it. You can't obey the 10 Commandments on purpose if you don't know the 10 Commandments. The seed on the rocky soil, the shallow soil, is faith that tries to grow, but it doesn't go deeper. The root isn't there or isn't sufficient. So the sun wilts it. There are many, many, many people. Billy Graham was heartbroken over the years how many people would come and pray and want to follow Jesus and go to church for 6 weeks and drop out and not go again for 10 years. But it happens. Just like people join the gym. If you go to almost any Y or gym in January, you're going to see a packed place. August, not so much. They start with intention and enthusiasm, but because they don't read the Bible, know the Bible, nourish the faith, they wilt. The seed choked by thorns is probably the most common in our culture. It grows. The person believes. But they have so much stuff in their life. Not always bad things. Thistles have wonderful flowers and they can be really beautiful. But you don't want them in your cornfield or your tomato patch. Plants grown in the weeds. You might get a little something from them, but they don't produce as well. When the more the weeds, the less they produce. And then the last is what we want to be. Seeds on good soil. Those who hear the word, receive the word, respond to the word. Roots go down deep, are nurtured with water and sunshine, and the weeds are kept at bay. Which type of soil are you? That's a question that you and God know the answer to. Are you still searching but don't really understand what faith in Christ is all about? You have bursts of enthusiasm but don't follow through. You have real faith but you're choked by all of the stuff going on. Or are you bearing fruit? That chart, and I hope at least a good portion of us will take it seriously. And even if you're not a visual person, you can use words to write out the same concepts. It's helpful for seeing where you are. There was a time, 8 years ago, I was well over 300 pounds. I'm now right at about 220. I still have at least 25, 30 pounds I could get rid of. But I feel good at 220. My cholesterol's good, my blood pressure's good, my whatever. Compared to that, I'm doing well. Now, if I had just gone the opposite direction, if I'd gone from 180 or 190 to 220, then I would feel bad, feel worse. The baseline, where you start, shows you where to go. People who are malnourished don't need to lose weight, they need to gain it. People who have had a surgery in a week need time to rebuild their muscle and their strength. So, but you have to know where you are first to know what to go from here. I don't recommend most people decide, okay, I'm going to set 8 goals. I'm going to improve all of these 8 areas right now. Now, there are people who have. When my brother finally got right with God, his life changed dramatically, powerfully, and a whole lot of progress in several months. But most of us can see an area or 2 areas. And if we pray about it, we can see which area God's tugging us on. And some things come before others. It's pretty hard to tell others about Jesus and use a lot of your talents for Jesus and love Jesus if you don't know the Bible or pray or worship. You know, some of those things come before, so you're able to share it with somebody else. You can't teach what you don't know. Often, if you ask him with your own chart in your own mind, whether filled out or not, God, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to grow? What do you want me to do? What's my next step? For example, if you decided you want to be better about reading the Bible, it depends on where you were on that. If you really aren't reading the Bible at all, and the only Bible you pretty much hear is from here, a good step would be to start attending Sunday school class, or there's other Bible studies, different times, different places. Pick up a devotional. We have upper rooms and our daily bread. If you spend between 9 and 15 minutes a day reading the Bible, it's not a study, but reading through, you'll get through the Bible in a year. People seem so impressed with that. And then you have people who've read the whole stack of romance novels. I don't know who does or doesn't, so don't show hymnals. But, I've read 10 times as many romance novels as there are pages in the Bible. And if there are parts of the Bible that are confusing, skip those for the time being. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens had the quote, "It's not the parts of the Bible I don't understand that bother me. It's the parts I do understand that bother me." My favorite Bible study method at this point, when I read the Bible, it takes longer, as I'm reading it in a chapter, as a verse hits me, I write it down. There's some chapters where I end up writing almost every verse. There are other chapters where I might write one. But I remember it better by doing that. And one time when I read through the book, different verses will jump out at me depending on what I'm facing. But a devotional is a place to start. Gives you a topic and some verses. Or Mark's Gospel. In a romance novel, it would be shorter than the first chapter. If you read Sports Illustrated or Field and Stream, just the contents of the pages of that magazine are greater than Mark's Gospel. The chapters are like half a little page each. And then you work at that goal. And because you forget one day or don't do it one day, doesn't mean you don't do it the next day. Obviously, if you take a different goal, you would have a different plan. And then, this is where people often have problems in faith, in growing in faith. Is because when you purpose to follow Jesus, when you purpose to go deeper, something always goes wrong. One, just because life has things go wrong. But 2, the enemy, Satan, Lucifer, whatever term you want to use, last thing it wanted is for you to follow Jesus. Like the bird in the story, Satan comes and steals the bean before you can live it. But if you have a tree, I have a friend, I only see them every few years now, but they had a greenhouse for years. And we were having a dry patch. And I was over and I was impressed. They weren't watering their little trees very much. So why aren't you doing that? They said, well, you have to make sure they have some water. But if you water them all the time, the roots come to the top and they're shallow. And then winds can blow them over as they get bigger. Where if you water them a deep soaking further apart, the roots go further and further down, which anchors and spreads and grows. And the tree, which isn't happy about it, I mean, it'll be wilted some of the time, but grows stronger. Those obstacles in our life that we hate and struggle with are often the things that end up being useful in places where we grow. I would never wish on or want to repeat those 4 years of Timmy mostly in the hospital fighting for his life. But I can tell you there was no period in my life where I learned to minute by minute trust in God more. And I came out a different person on the other side. Whatever our heartaches and our struggles, we can become bitter. Or we can let God use them to make us better. Sometimes our efforts bear fruit quickly. We planted a peach tree at the parsonage last May and got 11 peaches that were the biggest, juiciest, tastiest peaches I have ever had. I've never had a fruit tree give me fruit the first year before. It's always been 2 or 3 years. We also planted a little apple tree. It didn't do anything. Sometimes our efforts feel like we can just see them growing quickly. Or sometimes it's like the apple tree. When I've had apple trees before, sometimes it was the 3rd or 4th year before I got my first apple. Depending on the type of tree and the sometimes the efforts we do, we feel like we're not making progress. But we are. Because God's moving hand is often like the roots below ground and preparing us for the times when He needs us. I am absolutely honored and thrilled to be the pastor here. This is an incredibly loving church, a church that gives of yourselves over and over. When there are needs in people's lives, stuff just magically happens, and things are taken care of. We do a lot to serve the community, even when it's not easy. We've had some huge hiccups with Kids Club this year, just as far as some kids with major behavioral issues. Not most of the kids, but when it takes 3 adults to deal with a kid, and then you have to send them home, it would be easy to get frustrated. But our workers don't. They love the kids anyway. What we don't do super well here is go deeper. We need to be much more about the Bible and Sunday school, going deeper. Some of you may individually, but as a church, one of the areas our vision committee looked at is how we can grow deeper in faith. Because when the storms hit, when the storms of life are raging, A beautiful tree with shallow roots doesn't do you much good. You want one that goes deep. Many times we rage and we say, God, where are you? But we didn't learn to hear his voice before the storm. So it's hard for us to hear it in the storm. We are coming up to the season of Lent. We have 2 more weeks and then Lent begins March 6th. Now, Lent gets a bad rap because sometimes people say it's just all about giving up something silly. Like, for example, I'd be glad to give up Brussels sprouts. You could not shove Brussels sprouts down my throat under any conditions unless you had them absolutely coated in something like cheese. That defeats the whole purpose. The idea of fasting for Lent, Jesus fasted for 40 days in the wilderness, and the church has, since the 2nd century, had a period of fasting, of giving up. The idea is to give up something and give God that time, energy, or money, a way to grow deeper. It's not always easy. And it doesn't have to be about giving up. It can also be about adding what matters, adding the good. But so many times our lives are full of stuff and weeds, but even good stuff can choke out our time, God's still small voice. Passing on the Christian faith, like me holding Abby in that picture. The Christian faith is often caught more than taught. You see by example and who people are, often more than what they say. The kids in the youth group, they'll show up at John and Sarah's house when something bad happens at home. The kids that show up at Caitlin or Polly's door saying, we're hungry, there's not enough food at home, and they just magically feed them. The needs that get met through the food pantry, through the other funds that Claudia runs that help people in crisis. Seeing the love of Jesus hands-on often matters so much more than even the most wonderful programs. And in kids club or Sunday school, or even we adults grow, it's usually because of who someone is and that we see Jesus in them, than having them just tell us. You have to use words or people don't know. But who we are matters. And we fall short. There's none of us here that don't fall on our face from time to time. Or if you do, you're better than me. If you don't fall on your face, you're better than me. But we ask Jesus, we remember 1 John 1:9, that if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That God makes a way by changing us into the image of Jesus. A process theologians call sanctification, where we get changed. Some people, it's dramatic and just have a phenomenal transformation in a very short time. Most of us will be working on things the rest of our lives and letting God shape one area after another after another.